What if I told you there are 9 berry species that were grown during World War II to keep entire nations from starving, that each one produces fruit for 30 to 60 years without replanting, and that a single acre of these berries generates $8,000 to $15,000 in annual revenue while the farmer sleeps? No annual planting, no buying seed every spring, no begging the bank for operating loans every February, no praying for rain in July, no watching commodity prices crash in October. You plant once. You harvest every month from May through October. The bushes pay you like a pension, like a retirement fund rooted in the ground, for decades, for the rest of your life, and then they pay your children. During World War II, governments across America and Europe identified these species as critical survival crops. The USDA printed pamphlets promoting them. Victory Garden manuals listed them by name. Families planted them because the government told them to, and because the berries produced food faster, longer, and more reliably than anything else available during rationing. Then the war ended. Industrial agriculture needed annual crops. Annual crops require annual purchases: seeds, fertilizer, pesticide, equipment rental. Every spring, the farmer pays again. Every spring, the supply chain profits again. A berry bush that produces for 60 years generates one sale, one in a lifetime. No corporation can build a quarterly earnings report on a plant that never needs replacing, so they stopped promoting them, they stopped selling them, they stopped teaching them in agricultural extension programs funded by the same corporations that sell annual seed. The $60 billion seed industry, the $200 billion fertilizer industry, and the $84 billion pesticide industry need you planting corn and soybeans every single year. They do not need you planting a berry bush that will still be producing fruit when your grandchildren have grandchildren. Welcome back to Nature's Lost Vault. Before we open this vault, if these stories matter to you, the best way to preserve this knowledge is simple. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share these vaults with those who need to remember what we forgot. Berry number 1, the elderberry. In 1941, the British Ministry of Health issued a directive that changed the course of wartime nutrition. Citrus imports had been cut off by German U-boats patrolling the Atlantic. Vitamin C deficiency was becoming a national security threat. Scurvy, a disease the British Navy had conquered 200 years earlier, was returning to civilian populations. The solution was not a supplement. It was not a pharmaceutical. It was a hedgerow berry that grew wild across every county in England, the elderberry. The British government organized elderberry collection drives. Children were released from school to pick them. Women's Institute chapters coordinated harvesting brigades across rural England. The Ministry of Food distributed recipe cards for elderberry syrup. The government paid pickers for their harvest. A national campaign turned a wild hedgerow plant into a strategic military asset overnight. The hedgerows that farmers had maintained for centuries suddenly mattered more than ammunition factories, because a population without vitamin C cannot fight a war. Elderberries contain 60 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams. They contain anthocyanins at concentrations that dwarf blueberries. A 2019 meta-analysis published in Complementary Therapies in Medicine reviewed 180 studies and concluded that elderberry supplementation significantly reduced the duration and severity of upper respiratory infections. But here is why the elderberry belongs on this list. A single mature elderberry bush produces 12 to 15 pounds of berries per year. It begins producing in year 2. It produces for 60 years or more. It grows in zones 3 through 9, covering nearly every climate in the United States and Europe. It tolerates wet soil that kills most other fruit crops, and elderberry syrup retails for $15 to $25 per 8-ounce bottle. 1 acre of elderberries, approximately 300 plants, produces enough fruit to generate $8,000 to $12,000 annually in processed syrup sales. The federal ban lifted in 1966, but the damage was permanent. Most Americans still have never seen a fresh currant. Most Americans do not know what a currant is. The erasure was total. During World War II, the British government classified black currants as an essential crop. When citrus supplies were blocked, the Ministry of Food mandated that black currant syrup be given to every child under 2. The program was called the Welfare Food Scheme. It saved thousands of children from vitamin deficiency. Black currants contain 4 times the vitamin C of oranges. They contain twice the antioxidants of blueberries. They contain gamma-linolenic acid, an omega-6 fatty acid found in almost no other food. A single bush produces 10 to 12 pounds per year for 25 to 30 years. They thrive in cold climates where other berries fail, surviving -40 degrees without damage. 1 acre of black currants generates $6,000 to $10,000 annually. The jam, juice, and syrup market for currants in Europe exceeds $500 million per year. In America, the market barely exists because the ban erased currants from cultural memory so thoroughly that most grocery stores do not stock them. The timber industry got its ban. The supplement industry got its customers. The berry that could have fed a nation was made illegal and then forgotten. The ban lifted 58 years ago. The forgetting continues. Berry number 3, the gooseberry. The gooseberry is the elderberry's conspiratorial twin. Banned alongside currants in 1911. Equally productive, equally nutritious, equally erased. During both World Wars, British families depended on gooseberries as a primary fruit source. The bushes produced reliably in the cool, damp climate where other fruits struggled. Gooseberry fool, gooseberry jam, gooseberry pie, these were not delicacies. They were survival. A mature gooseberry bush produces 8 to 10 pounds of fruit annually for 20 to 30 years. The fruit contains exceptional vitamin C levels, up to 27 milligrams per 100 grams. The bushes tolerate shade that would kill most fruit crops, producing reasonable yields with as little as 4 hours of direct sunlight. The downing gooseberry, introduced in the 1850s, survived the mildew epidemics that destroyed every European variety imported to America. American gooseberry cultivars represent some of the toughest small fruit genetics on Earth. Disease-resistant, cold-hardy, shade-tolerant, productive for decades. Before the ban, 900 varieties of currants and gooseberries existed in American nursery catalogs. Today, you can find approximately 30. The genetics of the other 870 are gone. Destroyed not by nature, but by legislation purchased by an industry that valued pine lumber over human nutrition. Berry number 4, the serviceberry. This is the berry that indigenous peoples across North America depended on for 10,000 years, and that most Americans alive today cannot identify. The Cree called it Saskatoon, the Blackfoot called it Okikon, the Okanagan called it Sia. Every indigenous nation across the northern half of the continent had a name for it, because every nation depended on it. It was the primary fruit ingredient in pemmican, the original survival food that sustained indigenous nations through winters that killed unprepared settlers. Pemmican, made from dried serviceberries, rendered fat, and dried meat, provided complete nutrition in a form that stored for years. Explorers who crossed the continent carried it. Fur traders subsisted on it for months. During World War II, prairie communities in Canada and the northern United States turned to serviceberries when commercial fruit supplies collapsed. The bushes grew wild across millions of acres. They required nothing. They produced abundantly. They had been doing so since the last ice age. A single serviceberry bush produces 8 to 15 pounds of fruit annually. The berries taste like a cross between blueberry and almond, with a nutty richness that blueberries cannot approach. They contain more iron than blueberries, more fiber, more protein, and significantly higher levels of manganese and magnesium. The plant is virtually indestructible. Hardy to zone 2, which is -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Tolerates any soil type. Tolerates drought once established. Produces for 30 to 50 years with 0 inputs. Some wild specimens have been documented exceeding 80 years of age. Serviceberry plantations in Saskatchewan generate $5,000 to $8,000 per acre annually. The fruit commands premium prices at farmers markets because consumers who taste it never go back to blueberries. But try finding a serviceberry bush at your local nursery. The $800 million American blueberry industry made certain you would not. Berry number 5, the sea. In 1942, Soviet scientists were given an impossible task. Find a fruit crop that could survive Siberian winters, grow on degraded soil, and provide enough nutrition to supplement military rations for the Red Army. They found it growing wild on the riverbanks of Central Asia. See buckthorn, the most nutritionally dense berry ever analyzed by science. A berry so packed with compounds that Soviet scientists initially assumed their instruments were malfunctioning. They ran the tests 3 times. The results held. One small orange berry contained more bioactive compounds than most pharmacies stock on their shelves. Sea buckthorn berries contain 12 times more vitamin C than oranges. They contain all 4 fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, something almost no other fruit on earth can claim. They contain omega-3, omega-6, omega-7, and omega-9 fatty acids. They contain 190 bioactive compounds. A single berry is a multivitamin growing on a branch. The Soviet military used sea buckthorn extract to treat radiation burns in nuclear workers. Soviet cosmonauts carried sea buckthorn supplements into orbit. The Chinese government planted over 3 million acres of sea buckthorn for erosion control and nutrition simultaneously. A mature sea buckthorn bush produces 15 to 20 pounds of berries per year. It fixes nitrogen in the soil through root symbiosis with Frankia bacteria, actually improving the ground it grows on. It survives temperatures from -42 plus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It tolerates salt, drought, and soil so poor that nothing else will grow. 1 acre of sea buckthorn generates $10,000 to $15,000 annually in berry and oil sales. Sea buckthorn oil retails for $30 to $80 per ounce. The global market for sea buckthorn products exceeds $2 billion and is growing 8% annually. The plant that the Soviet military used to survive Siberia is barely known in America. The supplement industry would rather sell you individual vitamin capsules at $25 per bottle than tell you about a berry that contains all of them growing on a bush that thrives on neglect. Berry number 6, the autumn olive berry. This is the most controversial entry on this list, and I am including it precisely because most channels would not. Autumn olive, Elaeagnus umbellata, was introduced to the United States in the 1830s as an ornamental. The USDA actively promoted it in the 1940s and 1950s for erosion control and wildlife habitat. Millions were planted. Then it naturalized. Aggressively, by the 1990s, autumn olive was classified as invasive in 20 states. It became the enemy. Eradication programs were funded. Herbicide campaigns were launched. The plant was condemned. Here is what those eradication programs never mention. Autumn olive berries contain 17 times more lycopene than tomatoes. 17 times. Lycopene is the compound associated with reduced cancer risk, cardiovascular protection, and skin health. The berry that the government spent millions trying to destroy is one of the most potent sources of a cancer-fighting compound ever tested. Each bush produces 30 to 80 pounds of fruit annually. The fruit makes exceptional jam, sauce, and fruit leather. The plant fixes nitrogen, improving soil wherever it grows. It produces for 40 to 60 years. Now, the honesty, autumn olive, is genuinely invasive in many ecosystems. It outcompetes native plants. It alters soil chemistry through nitrogen fixation in ways that disadvantage native species. Planting it in natural areas is irresponsible and in some states illegal. But on managed agricultural land, on degraded sites, on land already disturbed by human activity, the argument for eradicating a nitrogen-fixing, cancer-fighting 80 pounds per bushberry crop becomes considerably weaker, especially when the alternative is leaving that land bare or planting annual crops that require $344 billion worth of chemical inputs every year. Managing it rather than eradicating it is the position this channel takes. Harvest the berries, control the spread, use the nutrition, stop spraying poison on food. Berry number 7, the Aronia chokeberry. In 1946, Soviet botanists collected wild Aronia plants from the forests of eastern North America and brought them to Russia. Within 2 decades, Aronia became one of the most widely cultivated berry crops in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. Millions of bushes were planted. Research institutes were dedicated to studying it. Aronia juice became a standard component of hospital nutrition programs across the Eastern Bloc. Meanwhile, in the country where Aronia originated, where the wild bushes still grew in wetlands from Maine to Minnesota, nobody had heard of it. The most antioxidant-rich fruit on the planet was growing wild in American forests, and Americans were importing acai from Brazil at premium prices. You cannot write satire this effective. Reality already did it. Aronia berries have the highest antioxidant content of any fruit ever measured. Higher than acai, higher than goji, higher than any berry the superfood marketing industry has ever promoted. The ORAC score, the standard measure of antioxidant capacity, for Aronia exceeds 16,000 per 100 grams. A mature Aronia bush produces 15 to 20 pounds of fruit annually. It grows in zones 3 through 8. It tolerates wet soil, dry soil, clay, sand, and partial shade. It has no significant pest or disease problems in North America. It produces for 20 to 30 years without replanting. 1 acre of Aronia generates $6,000 to $12,000 annually. The berries are astringent when fresh, which limits casual snacking, but they make extraordinary juice, wine, jam, and dried fruit. Processing eliminates the astringency entirely while preserving the antioxidant content. Russia grows 17,000 acres of a berry that America invented and forgot. The supplement industry sells you acai capsules imported from Brazil at $35 per bottle when a more potent antioxidant source grows natively in your backyard. This is the structure of modern nutrition. Import the exotic, ignore the local. Charge a premium for what could have been free. Berry number 8. The Lingonberry. In Scandinavia during World War II, lingonberries were not a luxury. They were a lifeline. When food supplies collapsed under German occupation, Norwegian and Finnish families survived on foraged lingonberries stored in simple water preservation. No sugar needed, no canning equipment. The berries contain natural benzoic acid that preserves them in plain water for months. Read that again. A berry that preserves itself in water. For months, without refrigeration, without processing, without canning equipment, without sugar, without any technology invented after the Stone Age. Norwegian families in 1943 stored lingonberries in wooden buckets of water in their cellars. They ate them through winter. No electricity required. No supply chain. No corporation between the family and the food. Just a berry with a built-in preservation system that humans had relied on for thousands of years before someone decided you needed a freezer and a membership to a wholesale club. The benzoic acid in lingonberries is the same compound used as a commercial food preservative in processed foods. The berry produces it naturally. The food industry synthesizes it in factories and adds it to products that would otherwise spoil. One grows on a bush for free. The other is manufactured, patented, and sold. You can guess which one the industry promotes. Lingonberries contain compounds that have been shown to reduce blood sugar levels, lower inflammation markers, and support urinary tract health through the same mechanism as cranberries but at higher concentrations. Swedish hospitals serve lingonberry sauce with every meal, not as a condiment, as preventive medicine that tastes like food. A mature lingonberry ground cover produces 1 to 2 pounds per square yard annually. That sounds modest until you realize lingonberries spread as a ground cover. One planting fills an entire bed within 3 years. They thrive in acidic soil that kills most food crops. They survive -40 degrees. They produce for 20 to 30 years. In Scandinavia, commercial lingonberry harvests from wild and cultivated sources exceed 100,000 tons annually. In America, the crop barely exists commercially. The cranberry industry generates $400 million per year selling a nutritionally inferior relative and has zero incentive to introduce a hardier, more nutritious competitor that consumers could grow at home without buying a single input. Berry number 9, the Hascap, the honeyberry. This is the berry that should terrify every blueberry grower in America. And the reason it does not is that almost nobody knows it exists. Hascap is a species of honeysuckle, Lonicera caerulea, that produces edible berries. It originates from northern Japan, Russia, and northern China. Indigenous Ainu peoples of Hokkaido called it the berry of long life and good vision. During World War II and the Cold War era, Soviet and Japanese researchers independently identified Hascap as a strategic food crop. The berries ripen in May, weeks before any other berry crop. In survival conditions, those weeks matter. They are the difference between scurvy and health, between caloric deficit and sufficiency, between a population weakening into spring and a population strengthening through it. The numbers are absurd. They sound invented. They are not. Hascap berries contain 3 times the antioxidants of blueberries, 5 times the vitamin C, more calcium, more potassium, more iron. The flavor is described as a combination of blueberry, raspberry, and black currant. A berry that tastes like 3 berries decided to become one. Every person who tastes one for the first time says the same thing. Why have I never heard of this? Because you were not supposed to hear about it. That is why. The bush survives -47 degrees Fahrenheit. It flowers at 20 degrees without frost damage, a biological impossibility that no other fruit crop can match. It grows in zones 2 through 7. It produces harvestable fruit in year 2 from planting. It reaches full production by year 5, yielding 8 to 15 pounds per bush, and it produces for 30 to 50 years. Some Russian specimens have been documented producing at 70 years of age. 1 acre of Hascap generates $8,000 to $15,000 annually at farmers market and direct-to-consumer prices. The U-picked market for Hascap is exploding in Canada, where the berry has been commercialized aggressively over the past 15 years. Canadian breeding programs at the University of Saskatchewan have developed cultivars with fruit size and flavor that make blueberries look like a downgrade. But in the United States, the blueberry industry moves $800 million per year. Blueberry growers associations lobby state agricultural departments. Blueberry research receives university funding. Blueberry marketing campaigns saturate grocery store aisles. No industry invites its own replacement to the table. Hascap threatens blueberry market share the way solar panels threaten coal. The science is clear. The product is superior. The incumbents are fighting. Now step back and look at all 9 together. Because individually, each berry is remarkable. Together, they form something the modern agricultural system was specifically designed to prevent. A permanent food supply. Elderberry produces June through September. Black currant produces July. Gooseberry produces June through July. Serviceberry produces June. See, buckthorn produces August through September. Autumn olive produces September through October. Aronia produces August through September. Lingonberry produces August through October. Hascap produces May through June. Plant all 9 and you harvest berries from May through October, 6 continuous months of fruit production. From perennial plants that require no annual planting, no annual seed purchase, no annual fertilizer application, no annual pesticide spray. The total investment for a diversified 1-acre berry planting, including all 9 species, is approximately $5,000 to $8,000. The annual revenue at maturity ranges from $8,000 to $15,000. The productive lifespan ranges from 20 to 60 years, depending on species. Do the math. $8,000 per year for 40 years is $320,000 from a single acre. 1 planting, 1 investment. For decades of monthly income, no bank loan, no operating costs, no corporate dependency, a corn farmer on that same acre earns $600 to $900 per year in gross revenue. Then subtract expenses. He buys seed every spring, $120, buys fertilizer every spring, $150, buys pesticide every spring, $80, rents equipment, or makes payments on a $400,000 combine, pays crop insurance, prays for rain, prays for prices, prays for subsidies funded by taxpayers who could be growing berries instead. After expenses, the average corn farmer nets $50 to $200 per acre. $200 on a good year. The berry farmer nets $6,000 to $12,000 per acre after minimal harvesting costs. On a normal year, $320,000 versus $8,000 in net income over 40 years. From the same acre of dirt, the berry farmer earns 40 times more while working less, spending less, and building a permanent asset that appreciates every year as the plants mature and the root systems deepen. This is the math the agricultural industry cannot allow you to calculate, because the moment you calculate it, you stop planting corn. The moment you stop planting corn, the seed company loses a customer. The fertilizer company loses a customer. The pesticide company loses a customer. The equipment dealer loses a customer. For industries lose revenue from one farmer making one decision, they cannot afford that decision multiplied by 1 million farms. The $60 billion seed industry needs annual crops. The $200 billion fertilizer industry needs annual applications. The $84 billion pesticide industry needs annual spraying. Together, $344 billion. In annual revenue depends on farmers choosing plants that die every fall over plants that produce for 60 years. The USDA promoted these berries during World War II because the nation needed food independence. Then the war ended. The chemical industry needed customers, and 9 berries that could have built permanent food infrastructure across every family farm in America were quietly removed from the conversation. Not banned, not burned, just forgotten, left out of extension bulletins, dropped from nursery catalogs, Excluded from agricultural loan programs designed around annual row crops, the system did not destroy these berries. It simply built a world where they became invisible. But the bushes are still growing. Elderberry lines abandoned fence rows across the Midwest. Serviceberry fills forest edges from Maine to Montana. Aronia grows wild in wetlands nobody visits. Wild gooseberries hide in forest understory across the northern states. See buckthorn plantations in Canada demonstrate what American agriculture refuses to consider. The genetics survived because the plants do not need the system. They never did. Here is your action plan. Start with 3 species. Choose Elderberry, Aronia, and Hascap if you are in zones 3 through 7. Choose Elderberry, Gooseberry, and see buckthorn if you are in zones 2 through 5. Choose Elderberry, Gooseberry, and Lingonberry if you have shade and acidic soil. Order from specialty nurseries that carry these species. Fedco Trees, Raintree Nursery, One Green World, Honeyberry, USA. These operations exist specifically because the mainstream nursery industry abandoned these crops. Plant 10 bushes of each species. Total investment under $300. Give them 2 years to establish. By year 3, you are harvesting. By year 5, you are generating income. By year 10, you are generating serious income. By year 20, the bushes have paid for themselves 100 times over. By year 40, your grandchildren are harvesting from the same plants you put in the ground this spring. That is what permanent food infrastructure looks like. That is what the World War II Victory Garden program was building before the chemical industry dismantled it. The system needed you to need the system. That was the product, not corn, not soybeans, 1 fertilizer application at a time, forever. 9 berries break that cycle. 9 berries that pay you every month for 60 years. While you sleep, while the corn farmer across the road buys seed again and prays again and borrows again and hopes that this year, maybe this year, the math will finally work in his favor. It will not. The math was never designed to work in his favor. It was designed to work in theirs. The seed company, the fertilizer company, the pesticide company, the bank that holds the operating loan, the system extracts wealth from farmers the same way a strip mine extracts ore, until nothing is left. The berries build wealth. Year after year, decade after decade, silently, reliably, without asking permission from anyone. The seed industry prayed you would never do this math. The fertilizer companies hoped you would keep buying every spring. The pesticide manufacturers needed you to believe that annual crops were the only serious agriculture. The berries do not care about serious agriculture, they just keep fruiting. May through October, year after year, decade after decade. They do not invoice you. They do not require a subscription. They do not send a sales representative to your door every February. They just keep producing. The way they produced for families who survived the war. The way they produced for the indigenous peoples who survived millennia before that. The way they will produce for your grandchildren if you plant them this year. If this vault opens something for you, subscribe to Nature's Lost Vault and hit the bell. Every like and every share helps preserve this wisdom. The next vault opens soon.